far as the dictionary is concerned, an arsenal is a place where arms and ammunition are made, maintained, prepared, stored, or issued in any combination. And I've sort of extended that definition for this talk to say an arsenal ship is a vessel to store and then fire large quantities of ammunition. And in practical terms, this really translates to building a ship which can carry, in modern terms, as many missiles as possible for a single type of mission, usually offensive land attack, but occasionally air and missile defense on the defensive side. And this is by no means a new concept. Ships which are assigned to carry and launch a large quantity of munitions are not a new idea. They go back a long way. And there's a lovely example in the Explosion Museum of a landing craft fitted for rocket launching, which was used in World War II. And that could fire a huge barrage of rockets onto a beachhead target simultaneously, or near simultaneously, which was quite awesome and probably terrifying if you're on the other end of it. That sort of concept got resurrected at various times over the past sort of 80 years or so. In the 1970s, the Soviet Union was investigating similar placement of huge numbers of ballistic missiles on dedicated warships with nuclear power plants. This concept was drawn up. This particular one is in a book by Vasyukin, and it showed 200 land attack ballistic missiles. They're all Scud missile equivalents. In the center of the ship, nuclear power plant, some air defense missiles on the left as well, which I've also circled in yellow there. So this very much met the condition for an arsenal ship. Single mission, land attack, lots and lots of missiles, probably exceedingly dangerous to do so because the Scud was a very bulky missile, carried dangerous fuel, and my suspicion is if one or two were fired, probably the whole ship would go up, but that's conjecture. The Soviet Navy saw sense and decided not to go with that design, but they iterated their designs. They generally went from single mission towards a more multi-mission ship, and that's how we ended up with the Kirov-class nuclear-powered battle cruisers. And there, the armament was a much more conventional 20 SSN-19 anti-ship missiles, which had a secondary land attack capability, plus quite a few anti-air missiles, which is very much a multi-mission ship rather than an arsenal ship. That's worth noting that one of the examples of the Kirov class has just been refitted, taken about 16 years to refit. It's just out of refit and on trials now. But the missile armament's been stripped out and replaced with a larger number of smaller missiles. Not quite sure how many at the moment, but it will be quite a large number. So it's tending back towards an arsenal ship concept. If we look a little later, by the 1990s, in the US Navy, two main classes of major warship were being produced. You had the Ticonderoga class cruiser at the top, the Arleigh destroyer at the bottom. And both of these had successfully integrated the Aegis command and control system and missile direction system, and large arrays of vertical launch cells for missiles. But these were very much a mixed array. The Mark 41 vertical launch system could take anti-air warfare or land attack or anti-submarine warfare missiles. And so normally a ship would come out with a mixed load. It wouldn't be a single mission dedicated vessel. Again, 1990, Cold War had ended. We had the first Gulf War, and the US Navy was looking towards perhaps creating a ship which could usefully carry more than just the maybe 15 to 20 Tomahawk land attack missiles that a Ticonderoga or Arleigh would carry normally. And so there was a flurry of activity towards the development of a specialist strike cruiser. This would be a vessel very heavily armed with missiles that could strike land targets and be a much cheaper alternative for long-range power projection than the huge Nimitz-class nuclear aircraft carriers. As we know, in sort of Gulf War I, aircraft carrier strikes were quite a large component of the land attack battle in Iraq. But carriers are quite vulnerable, particularly in confined waters, and so the idea was maybe you develop these strike cruisers to carry out that kind of mission. And one study took the concept to an extreme with up to about 500 missiles. On a paper study, it caught the eye of the Chief of Naval Operations. He was very enamored with the idea, and it rapidly became the only game in town in the early to mid-90s, as the US Navy focused on developing an arsenal ship. And for 3 years, about 92 to about 95, 96, major manufacturers explored the design space and produced various models of their arsenal ship concepts, and you can see some examples here. The model which got the most traction was one that was very futuristic, very low profile, such as this 20,000 ton vessel from Lockheed Martin. 20,000 tons is large cruiser size in modern terms. Certainly about twice the displacement of the existing Ticonderoga class cruisers that were in the US Navy inventory. This was very much a single mission ship. There was a power plant, a bridge, and no less than 384 vertical launch cells for Tomahawk missiles. And this represented about 1/4 of the entire US stock of land attack missiles in one vessel. Rather too many eggs in one single basket, possibly. There were also 4 retractable turrets firing Army-compatible long-range bombardment rockets, a bit like the land-based multiple launch missile system. From some perspectives, the ship was very attractive. It certainly looked futuristic. Sleek and angled deck gave low visual and radar signatures. However, it never progressed beyond the design stage, and more thought shows that this concept is a little bit idealized. It didn't show profile spoiling features like navigation radars, masts, communication antennas, things which a ship absolutely has to have in order to operate. The longer term research was looking at providing those hidden somewhere within the structure, but there were no real details in this concept model. It also looks like quite a wet ship. Seakeeping might have been quite interesting. It had limitations. It had no defensive armament. It had a gun at the front, but nothing else. So it would always require escorts. It was also seen as such a high value unit that you could envisage an adversary targeting this kind of vessel with special operators in the harbour, even before it went to sea in a crisis. So maybe it was a little bit too vulnerable. Almost as soon as it arose, the arsenal ship concept faded as personalities in the US Navy changed, and by the late 1990s, the emphasis was back on flexible multi-mission platforms for the post-Cold War environment rather than single-role vessels. However, it's quite a nice model from Lockheed Martin there, and luckily China has come up with the goods and produced a nice resin model in 1/700th scale, which I managed to get hold of. This is from EV Models. It's a very, very quick build because there's virtually nothing to build. It took longer to paint than it did to actually do the construction. Much of the detail is provided by the one-piece resin casting of the hull and superstructure. And the vertical launch cells, you can see the sort of squares all the way along before and after the sort of small superstructure. Each of those cells had something like 8 vertical launch missiles in them. So there was something like, I think it was 384 total missiles, plus the rockets in the tradable turrets. There's very little to do apart from painting it up and just making it look pretty. So that was the arsenal ship concept as it stood in the 1990s. It obviously got cancelled, but some of the concepts did get taken forward. And many of the attributes of the arsenal ship turned up in the Zumwalt class destroyers, the future destroyer of the 1990s, termed DGG 1000. This was the next generation destroyer that the US Navy was going to acquire in large numbers. This was conceived with 80 deck-edge vertical launch cells for land attack or air defense, plus some very, very advanced 6-inch guns for shore bombardment with advanced projectiles that could go a long range and be homed in on targets. Sensors and weapons were hidden behind stealthy coverings, so it was clearly a more practical ship than the Lockheed Martin design of 10 years earlier. And effectively, these ships could act as little arsenal ships. 3 of these Zumwalt-class destroyers have been built, but they have been widely regarded as expensive white elephants without a role. They're very expensive. The advanced gun and ammunition has never come to fruition, didn't work properly, and the cost was absolutely huge. So much so that the composite superstructure of the first 2 vessels was replaced by a stainless steel version in the 3rd ship of the class. But if you compare and contrast the 2 models of Zumwalt and the Lockheed Martin arsenal ship, you can see a lot of similarities there. The stealthy gun, faceted and sort of concealed until it was actually in use, the low profile superstructure as well, with ideally sensors and things on it. More recently though, the Zumwalt has been modified, or the first of class has been modified. And this is being modified to take what's called conventional prompt strike hypersonic missiles and beginning to turn the Zumwalts into a bit more of an arsenal ship. The concept artwork that you can see here on the right, it's from Lockheed Martin. Again, from the left, it's from Naval News and H.I. Sutton. It shows the forward gun being replaced by 4 vertical launch tubes. Now, in this sort of concept art, it shows a missile in each tube. In practice, each tube is going to contain 3 missiles. So at the replacement of the gun, you will get 12 missile tubes for some hypersonic long-range land strike missiles. And if the replacement of the first forward gun in the first of class is successful, then the gun behind it will be replaced with a similar sort of module to give you 24 very large land attack missiles from the Zumwalt, as well as the existing vertical launch cells. So it's tending towards a slightly bigger arsenal ship. Taking a picture from Lockheed Martin again, looking at the sort of work that was going on about a year ago, you can see, it's not very clear, but you can see some of the deck installations in the forward area for 4 of these very large launch tubes. They're about the same size as the Virginia payload modules in Virginia class submarines, if you've seen those before. This, of course, meant that I would have to take my Zumwalt model and modify it. So I've taken the front gun off my Zumwalt and put 4 encapsulated launch tubes in the front. I find it's quite useful to make little domed capsules by using a leather hole punch, punching it through thin plastic and then sticking that on thicker plastic to make the enclosure there. But these Zumwalt conversions, they're not just an end in themselves, they're actually a prototype and testing environment for what will come into the next generation destroyer for the US Navy, or at least the next generation as planned at the moment. This is in the early design stage at the moment, but current graphics show a ship with 2 banks of vertical launch cells, one forward of the bridge and one in between the 2 superstructure units. Those vertical launch cells are either the type Mark 41, supported by the Arleigh Burkes, or there is an alternative version which has the oversized cells, matching the ones in Zumwalt to give it a much heavier punch for land attack. And the concept art, of course, shows lots of missiles very successfully engaging targets on land and sea, and in the air, probably. Once again, there's a Chinese model of the DGG-X already out, slightly more complex than the one of the Arsenal ship. But similar to the description of the concept ship, you have a choice as to what kind of vertical launch cells to put in, small or large. And it even gives you some concept missiles to go with it. This again didn't take very long to put together because apart from the obvious external bits on the structure, there's not an awful lot to the kit. But it was quite interesting to build and then to compare it with other models. But when it comes to modern attempts to build ships carrying lots of missiles, the current prize might go to the 2 Koreas. Both seem to be engaged in a race to put the biggest and widest range of missiles to sea. South Korea's is a system which they've made large models of, and they're building the ships themselves. They seem to have small missiles at the front, ranging all the way through 5 different sizes to very large ballistic missiles, which can be launched off the fantail and the helicopter deck there. Absolutely huge. There's an operating concept, and the Korean idea of using these ships is for their KMPR mission, which, if you expand it, is the Korea Massive Punishment and Retaliation Mission, which gives you an idea that this kind of ship is built to perhaps respond to any attack from North Korea on South Korea with some fairly hefty missiles on the landmass of North Korea. Quite awesome. But North Korea is doing exactly the same. It's just launched 2 of these vessels. One of them capsized during launch and had to be put back up again. But these 2 ships have been launched with, again, 5 different sizes of missiles. Small anti-air missiles at the very front, all the way back to very large vertical launch cells, which you can see where the hangar would normally go, launching massive land attack missiles. So North and South Korea are building arsenal ships effectively. There are other ways these days to increase the firepower in the fleet. An alternative approach is the Ohio-class missile submarines, which, rather than building the arsenal ships of the 1990s, 4 of the Ohio boats were converted so that each of their ballistic missile tubes could carry 7 Tomahawk missiles, rather than 1 long-range Trident missile. So again, if you've got 24 launch tubes and 7 missiles in each, you have quite a potent arsenal there. And these Ohio-class boats have occasionally been sorted into places like the Persian Gulf to provide deterrence and occasionally to provide attack. China is also considering building semi-submersible warships with lots and lots of missile cells on them for land attack. Whether it's Taiwan they're looking at or elsewhere, I don't know. So submarines are a possibility. Another alternate approach is to use remote control vehicles. And the US Navy has been building and fielding and trialing a number of unmanned, uncrewed surface vessels, medium and large size. This one's a medium size called Ranger. On the deck at the back, you have 40-foot and 20-foot ISO containers, which contain a variety of things, sensors or missiles. So a number of these could be used to follow your main warship, and you control them remotely to provide you with increased firepower. The Dutch Navy has also just acquired or just ordered 2 arsenal ships to enhance their current frigates' firepower. And again, you can see this is a minimally crewed vessel with ISO container size missile launchers on the back there. So this is a sort of thing that's going to probably appear in many navies over the next few years. We, of course, won't be left behind. There have been articles which you may have seen over the last few months in the press saying Britain wants a missile-carrying drone warship, the Type 91. This will be sort of minimally crewed vessel again, mainly containing missiles with nothing much else, but it will be an adjunct to Type 45 destroyers and the Type 83 destroyers that are replacing the Type 45s in the next decade. The snappy title that the Navy is using at the moment is MIAMDS, Maritime Integrated Air and Missile Defence and Strike. Rolls off the tongue, of course. And that's part of the concept for the replacement of the Type 45 destroyers. You'll have a largish manned destroyer and a number of supporting Arsenal drones. And the strike element will probably be from the Arsenal drones, with the main vessel providing principal air defence. And the strike element is really tied up with air defence in that the idea is that you will strike land targets before they can launch missiles which threaten your warships. And so in a situation like the Red Sea at the moment, you'll be trying to use these Arsenal drones to take out Houthi launchers before they launch against merchant ships and your own vessels. And in fact, some of the articles that have talked about the Royal Navy's plans have dusted off the old Lockheed Martin diagrams of Arsenal ships to try and illustrate that. And there was a report that came out last year saying Britain desperately needs Arsenal ships. It was produced by a think tank. The think tank happened to be sponsored by Lockheed Martin, who of course were the manufacturers of the Arsenal ship concept in the past and manufacturers of many missiles in the current day. I'm sure that's a coincidence. So my final comments are, there's always a compromise between ship attributes. Every so often someone explores an extreme for a single mission, and occasionally it works if it's in the right place at the right time, like the rocket landing craft on D-Day. And we may well be seeing Arsenal ships in parts of some navies in the future. And that ends my presentation. Thank you.